Do you fancy learning how to arrange flowers in an urn-style container? I'm Julie from Julie Davis Flower Workshops and Flower Start, the online flower arranging classes. For this project you'll need an urn-style vase. This is actually a Wedgwood vase I bought from the charity shop for about £4. It's got a few chips on the handle, but it's absolutely perfect for this arrangement. You'll also need some chicken wire. I bought this from the garden centre many years ago, or you could try making your own using floristry stub wires. You'll need a pair of wire cutters. And if you don't have wire cutters, use your trusty old floristry scissors. They've got a special cutting blade here for wires. And because we're going to be using the chicken wire, it's really quite tough on your hands, so you might want a pair of gardening gloves. The first thing you'll need to do is to unravel your chicken wire and cut off a length, and you can see as I'm doing that it's got all these cut ends, so do be really careful. The opening of my vase I know is about this big, so you want to cut off a strip of the wire that is about the size of the opening of your container. You might find it easier, instead of coming off with a natural curl of the wire, to bend it over the other way, and then you can flatten it down and hopefully it won't spring up as you're trying to cut it. I'm going to use the same little points across the wire so I know that I'm cutting it through the same place every time, and then I'll end up with an equal width length of the mesh instead of one that's a bit skew-iff. Having cut out your strip of wire, I then need to reduce the length a little bit. I just want the wire mesh to be twice the length of the opening of my container. So actually, I only need about 2/3 of this piece of wire. So my container, the mouth opening, is this wide. So I need to cut it across this edge now. And then this is where the fun part starts. You need to create a 3D structure, a pillow-like structure, out of your flat piece of wire. So folding it up and round, and then fasten it together using the little excess cut ends of the chicken mesh. Twisting them together to fasten them in place. So you've now made yourself a tube of chicken wire which is open at both ends. So the next job is to seal these ends closed. We do this in exactly the same way by bending the wires over each other and twisting them around. So you've sealed the end across the top here. I've still got lots of tiny bits of wire showing, so I'm going to use my wire cutters to bend those back in place and really tuck them out of the way. That's slightly neater, but also not quite so jagged on your hands. And then do the same at the other end. So having made your pillow of chicken wire, you're all ready now to shape that and crunch it a tiny bit so it fits down inside your container. But first of all, I need to add some water. So So I've filled my vase up to about midway. I can always add in more water later on, and you will need to keep an eye out on your flowers over the next few days because you can't see through your container. You need to tuck your fingers inside to see whether the tips are getting wet, and if they're dry you need to add in more water. So with my lovely cloud-like pillow of chicken wire, I'm going to just scrunch that down slightly, making it into more of a sphere, so it will fit down into the neck of my container. I've come up a bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. I'm scrunching the wires up into a ball shape, so it's changed from a flat pillow to a sphere. Don't be too heavy-handed though and crush your ball too much, otherwise you'll find that you run out of holes and space between your wires and you'll have nowhere to feed your flowers through. I think that's probably about right. So there's my wire inside the container. It's coming down a little bit into the throat or the mouth of my vase. Let me show you. Do you see? I can't tip too much because of the water that's in my vase, but the mesh is sunk down to about here, but slightly bulbous over the top of the container. I like to sketch out the greenery of my arrangement before I start deciding how big and wide I want it to be. I've mainly picked greenery from my garden, but I do have a few stems from the supermarket bunches that I've bought. I've got some laurel. Quite often laurel is too large to use in arrangements to enjoy at home, but because my container is quite big, I can afford to go a bit bigger with my greenery as well. Next of all, I've got Fatsia, a really useful plant to have in the garden. It grows really well and looks really exotic, and your friend really in all arrangements is a big leaf, some bushy leaves and some longer lengths of material as well. For bushiness, I've got Choicea and then a bunch of beautiful trailing ivy as well, and a couple of stems from the supermarket. This one is called Pistache. I'm going to start off with my laurel, which is the tallest material I've got, just so I can see how high I want my arrangement to be and how wide as well. So I'll recut the stems. These are quite woody, so I'll have to see whether my floristry scissors are up to it. If not, I can go and get my secateurs. So I cut the stem at an angle so it takes up more water and will last longer. I'm going to arrange the flowers so I can see them, and I'll keep turning my turntable so you can see what I'm up to. Three pieces of green first of all, a top one and two side pieces. I'm going to add the Fatsia in next, and they're going to trail over the front of the vase. It's quite handy with the Fatsia stem. You can bend it the other way just to encourage the leaf to drape in the position you want it to, but do be really careful doing this because you may end up snapping your greenery. Same again. So you can see if I turn the container part way round, you can see the tips of the Fatsia here, the upright section of the laurel, and as I come all the way round, you'll see how wide the arrangement's going to be. The next thing I need to do is this bit of laurel is flopping around, is to put more greenery in to fill up the central heart of my container. And the more stems you add, the more robust everything becomes. And as well as the chicken wire holding up your greenery, the stems will start to hold up their neighbouring stems. I'm going to add in the ivy next. It's quite bushy, and I will need to take off these top stems in order that the cut end can be in water. can see this piece of ivy here is quite long. I've pushed it in at the side and wrapped it around the back of the container, and it's wrapping around the little footed area here. So it's as if the whole arrangement is entwined together. I haven't got the vase as one entity and then the greenery as the other. It's all part of the same. And when you're working on your own flowers at home, you will need to remember to keep looking at it from different directions, but also remember which way is front, otherwise everything will end up a little bit skew-whiff. Next, I'm going to add in the choisia, a really lovely bushy greenery. I don't particularly like the scent, but it's really going to fill out the centre of my container. I'm going to get rid of quite a lot of this side growth and just put that bushy head in. And I think that's probably enough greenery for now, so I'll tidy up and then show you how I'd add my flowers in. I'm not going to throw the greenery away just yet though, because I might need some extra pieces just as finishing touches when I get to the end. And now for the flowers, and you can see this arrangement, it doesn't have to be made all in one go. I really like my flower arrangements at this greenery only stage, and if you've got a well-stocked garden with lots of different colours, forms and textures in your greenery, you may be happy to have a container of green to enjoy indoors. But I've bought my flowers, so let's add them in. My flowers have all come from the supermarket. I've got some bloom chrysanthemums, they're about a week old, some speckled spray chrysanths, some roses and white chrysanthemums around the back here, and some gerberas as well. I've kept my colour palette quite limited with the purpley pinks and then just a splash of white if I feel I need to lift things up a little bit. I'm going to start with my biggest flowers first, the 2 bloom chrysanthemums. These are your focal flowers, or as I like to call them, the wow flowers, the flowers that are really going to catch your attention. I've only got 2 of these flowers, so you have to be really careful about how you put them into your arrangement. You don't want them ending up like a little pair of eyes or a pair of bunny ears, so you need to offset them a little bit, or ideally have 3 flowers. It's much easier to work in odd numbers. I'm going to cut these quite short, so I measure them up against my container and then cut them according to where I want them to sit. This one I've cut quite low, so you can see the full face of it. This one's a little bit higher and set a tiny bit further back, and you can really only see it in side profile. I found a lily in my bucket as well, left over from another project, so I think I'll add that in too. That's creating a really colourful lift into the centre of the arrangements. My biggest flowers tucked down low where they'll be really, really eye-catching. Gerberas next. These are quite long stemmed for supermarket gerberas, so I'm going to put them in and give me the opportunity to climb up a little bit higher through my arrangement. And again, just measuring before you cut. You can cut shorter, but of course you can't add anything onto the length if you cut too short to start. Measure up and cut. Measure up and cut. And you can see with every flower you add, it adds another dimension to the arrangement. So these are my spray chrysanthemums. You do need to be careful when you're using the chrysanths. Quite often they've got stems with no heads on them. So do a little bit of a cleaning out of any headless stems, and then your arrangement will look perfect. Take off the lower leaves, anything that's going to be in the water, and recut the stems. So those spray chrysanthemums have really started to fill out the centre of the arrangement, giving it a bit more body, a bit more substance. And how about some spray carnations next? So I've got my large chrysanthemum blooms, my middle-sized gerbera blooms, and then I've got the spray of the carnation and the chrysanthemum. So all the time my flowers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I'm putting these in where I can see a gap. And they just add a bit of a lightness to the edge of the arrangement. The more flowers you add into your vase, the trick it is to get the stems in. So you may need to sort of corkscrew them down, and just remembering that you need to be in charge, but you don't want to be so heavy-handed that you're starting to break your stems or knock the flower heads off. I think I've probably got enough in here for now, so I'm going to step back, go away and have a cup of tea, and then because I've got some extra flowers and greenery left, I can have one last look and see whether anything needs balancing up or whether I can spot any holes that need filling.